Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Faith and Finance Forum presented by the Catholic Finance Association and sponsored by Aquinas Wealth Advisors. We have a great guest with us today. Our good friend Tony Minopoli from the Knights of Columbus is with us. Hi, Tony. How are you?
I'm wonderful, John. How are you?
Very well. Thanks for being with us. Let's start with a prayer, shall we?
Shall
Father, Son, Holy Ghost, amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God,
Mother of
pray
God,
for us
pray for
sinners,
us sinners,
now at the
now
hour of our
and the
death.
hour of our death.
Amen.
Amen.
Saint Joseph, pray for us.
Pray for us.
Father, Son, Holy Ghost,
Holy
amen.
Ghost. Amen.
Tony Monopoly, it's been almost 20 years at the Knights of Columbus. Where's the time
Yeah,
gone?
it's pretty crazy. I sit back and think about it. I think I'm getting younger though, John, not older. And I was knowing that we were going to be talking today. I was reflecting on when I first met you when we were trying to figure out what are these Legatus guys up to, and that was the start of what's now been a pretty long friendship. So it's wonderful to be with you. And of course, I keep up with you on your various travels and your LinkedIn posts, so kind of always know where my friend John is, where he is, and what he's up to.
Well, your friendship means a lot to me, Tony, and thanks again for being with us. Well, Knights of Columbus, 20 years again as a part of the organization on the staff, 10 years since you founded the Knights of Columbus Asset Advisors,
Yes.
where you serve as president and chief investment officer. Tell us a little bit just about, a reflection, I guess, on your whole career at the Knights, specifically the Asset Advisors, anywhere we
Sure.
want to go, Tony.
Sure. So it was interesting. I was a partner in an investment firm, and we had a hedge fund to fund business and our traditional advisory business. We got a big offer for the hedge fund business, and it was sold. And then we sold the advisory practice to another organization. And I realized 15 minutes in, this is not where I want to be. And I had two sort of competing opportunities: one to go to an extremely large hedge fund, and or to come to the Knights of Columbus. So from an economic standpoint, I made the dumbest mistake a human could make. From a personal standpoint, and John, you and I have had conversations over the year about the importance of our Catholic faith to us as men and to our families. It feels like, this 20 years has gone by in the blink of an eye. And back in 2014, with now our immediate past Supreme Knight, Carl Anderson, who still serves on our board, Carl and I talked about, really extending what we've been doing for the Knights of Columbus and managing what's now almost $30 billion portfolio for the general account that supports our insurance program for our members. It's, why don't we take the power of that to other Catholic institutions and individuals? So we basically drew it up on a piece of paper in his office in 2014, and from that legal pad, we got going, and our funds became effective in February of 2015, and away we go. So we're just past our ninth anniversary. The mutual funds are about $1.6 billion, and then we have roughly $1 billion more of other assets. So these are dioceses and other Catholic institutions. But we're really seeing big growth, John, and this heartens me, in the high net worth and individual investor market. A third of our assets are frankly from our members, which to me is a huge testament of their faith in what we're up to. But we're on many of the wealth manager platforms, the Morgan Stanleys and Fidelities and Schwabs and Vanguards, and seeing immensely strong cash flow. So I think, the world in some part is becoming more secular, but I think, as you and I have talked about, I think the world people are looking for, I want something better for me and my family. I want to lean on my Catholic faith, and I want to do it with an organization who's doing things that I believe in and can get behind. And I think, in a nutshell, that's what's really been propelling it. So it's been a heck of a lot of fun, and it continues to be a great ride.
And what are some of those things that the Knights of Columbus and the advisory fund are doing that are so closely aligned with your investors' values? I mean, why are people flocking to the Knights of Columbus
Sure.
over other options?
So I would say this one, and I'll give you the closing part that I give to a pitch when I talk to dioceses or other Catholic institutions. And my final words are always: if we can offer you compelling performance at reasonable fees, compliance with Catholic social teaching, and the knowledge, and this gets to your question, that the profitability of what we do supports the very things that you believe in. I don't say that should guarantee us that we win, but I think it should guarantee us that we get consideration. So here's some of those things. I mean, we've been providing coats to kids, our coats program. Gosh, it's got to be over a decade. Patrick Kelly had the honor, our current Supreme Knight, and I know you know Patrick. He had the honor of placing our 1 millionth coat on a little girl in Colorado this past winter. Karen and I, my wife, we're involved in a coat distribution here in Connecticut, one of the poorest neighborhoods in New Haven. Those kids will never know. They may get a new coat, but what you get back from them is more than you give them. So our coats, our wheelchair program, we provide wheelchairs to provide mobility. What we've been able to do in Ukraine, our Ukraine Solidarity Fund, we've provided north of 22 million. I believe we've distributed 15 million. The other is, and we're all praying for this to happen, our ultrasound program. Carl Anderson conceived of it. Patrick Kelly grabbed it and ran with it. We have over 1,800 ultrasounds that we have helped finance with our councils in the US and Canada. And we're hopeful that by the time our international convention, which takes place in Quebec the first week of August this year, that our 2,000th ultrasound is going to be put in place. And I think when people realize that whether it's the premiums they pay for their insurance or the management fees that we make from the mutual funds, that that's where our profit is going, it resonates meaningfully. And we're doing business with, gosh, I think it's about 15 women's religious orders and about a dozen men's religious. So it's, and as you know, when you're around these, particularly those in consecrated life, they're onto something when you see the joy and the happiness that they have. So I think in a nutshell, John, that's what drives and knowing that what we're going to do is to continue to support those things, and not to mention disaster relief. I mean, whenever there's a hurricane, a flood, a tornado, the Knights are there pretty quickly behind our first responders to try to provide some aid and comfort to those that are affected.
It's really such an incredible story, Tony. And one of the things that really strikes me about the Knights of Columbus is that it doesn't seem like there's any resting on the laurels. You know what I mean? Like there's so much history, so much tradition with the Knights, but it's like every time I look into it, it seems like there's a new exciting initiative, serving the poor, serving the less fortunate, being there in the hour of need, just like you described. I mean, the intensity is just really inspiring. Founded in 1882 by Father Michael McGivney. Tell us a little bit about the history in the early years of the Knights of Columbus.
Yeah, sure. So we started, as you mentioned, Father McGivney started in 1882, just not a mile from here in the basement of St. Mary's Church, where his body now lays in a beautiful green marble sarcophagus, fitting a good Irishman.
Yes.
Um, but it was really, we had the men, the Irish Catholic and Italian Catholic local men building the infrastructure dying. And that was a time that fraternal benefit societies were a bit popular here in the US. The Masons were growing and the things that they were doing. And Father McGivney thought we needed to start something to bring Catholic men together. And it literally started up front, John, as a pass the hat situation. If a brother Knight died, money was collected. And best the records can tell, we became an actuarially based life insurance company in the way that you and I would think about life insurance in 1901. I think one critical point, we do not require the purchase of a product because we want to get the man right. Patrick Kelly talks about this all the time. If we get the man right, we get the right man in, we get him right, we can help evangelize. I always say, flipping the script, if we've got financial products that you need and they support you and they are the things that you believe in, then you'll find your way here. So we want to get men in and we want to do more to support families. We've created some initiatives, Fathers for Good. John, contemporary television and movies have been denigrating fatherhood forever,
Yes.
forever, toxic masculinity. We buy none of that at One Columbus Plaza. We think when you have a strong man for your family, when you're there to protect, and yes, protect, that's what we are as men, right? God put us on this earth, right? We protect our families, we protect the institutions we believe in, protecting our parishes and dioceses, that we protect and provide. Those are the things that we do. And think of the things. I always say I learned a ton from my mom. I learned a ton from my dad, and I learned a ton from watching my mom and dad. And I'm hoping my kids are a bit older than yours, 27 and 25. But Karen and I have tried to impart, those very same things on Joseph and Marissa. So in any event, coming out of that, we grew, and we grew in leaps and bounds. After World War II, huge influx of membership with the men returning from overseas, again after the Korean War, again after the Vietnam War. So we're very close to knocking on the door of 2.1 million members. It was very heartening. We had 89,000 members last fraternal year. We're pushing to 93,000 new members this year, and I'm happy to report we're growing younger. So it just tells me that the message and the mission still matter today. And if I could share one inside baseball anecdote, when Patrick Kelly joined the Knights of Columbus, Patrick joined as our vice president of public policy. And his first office when he joined the Knights is on the floor where the investment department lives. So Patrick was on the opposite side of the trading room. And he and I got to be friends. And we've had a very warm and cordial relationship through his entire, he joined a year after I did. We knew pretty quickly, it was pretty obvious to anyone that followed the Knights or knew Patrick, who Carl's successor was going to be. And when he was elected, and I'm proud to say I was one of the people able to cast a vote from our board of directors to elect Patrick Kelly as our 14th Supreme Knight. And I said to him early on, I said, so are you going to tend the garden or are you going to grow the garden? And he smiled and he said, I didn't come here to be a caretaker. So he really, Carl took an amazing order from Virgil Deckant and did amazing things and grew it. Patrick has taken that baton and has said, there are things that we're going to do. And one of the things I'm really proud of, John, the Knights were always very much about service, as you know. But one of the things that Patrick is trying to do is to really bring faith formation is really a part of what we're doing. And we've just started this CORE initiative. So CORE, Latin for heart, it's open to men in parishes. We have, I believe, 4,000 councils that have CORE programs going on. It's not about trying to drive membership to the Knights of Columbus, but it's providing a good foundational Catholic study for men in parishes to come together and to study together. And we're having bishops around the country literally writing letters to Patrick. He's been sharing them with us, saying, please bring CORE to my diocese. It's what the church needs. So I would say this. I have a very good friend who works for one of the large investment firms in New York. And she said to me one day, it must be nice working for an organization where the reason that you manage money isn't simply to make wealthy people wealthier. And I think it's the primary reason that I joined. I think it's the primary reason I've stayed. And at 50, I'll be 56 in a couple months. I think it's the primary reason, God willing, and that Patrick doesn't throw me out the window. It's the reason I'm hoping to be here until I retire.
Gosh, brilliant monologue and so much to cover there. I really don't know where to start, but what really stood out to me was the continuing centrality of fraternity, which is just clearly such a part of the Knights of Columbus's DNA. Tony, I reflect on the fact that fatherhood is down in our country. I've seen statistics that as many as half of kids are growing up without a dad these days. I saw another study that a quarter of young men report having zero friends.
Yeah.
These are problematic issues, right? These are serious challenges, but the Knights goes right at the heart of that, doesn't it?
Yeah. There's another study I saw, John, playing right to the ones that you cited, talking about the success of children.
Yeah.
And, people would automatically think, well, wealthy people being in the right zip code. Interestingly enough, the nuclear family is the number one contributing factor to the healthiness and future prospects for children. And that thing about men, the number of men that say that they can't cite, two or three friends. And I think of some of my closest friends are guys that are in my Knights of Columbus Council. In fact, my Knights of Columbus Council started with one of my very best friends. We didn't even know the other was a knight. He had been a knight as a kid, a teenager in Greenwich, Connecticut. And we were in my basement and he saw my 4th degree sword. And he said, you're a knight? And I said, yeah, I didn't know you were a knight. And literally one more bottle of wine later, we decided we're going to start a council at our parish. And that's now 130 men strong. And I think the beauty of belonging to a Legatus, a Knights of Columbus, being involved with the Napa Institute, the young people coming up through Focus, that you can grab on to other people that have shared values. And we're trying to drive out the notion, men need other men with those beliefs. One of the things that we offer, I've been blessed, as you are blessed, John, we can write checks to support the things that we believe in. But one of the things about the Knights is that you roll up your sleeves and you're involved in tactile charity. And I think for a lot of men, being shoulder to shoulder with other men, right? And then you're driving examples to your children. And my kids now in their 20s talk about the times that they were at pancake breakfasts or, Tootsie Roll drives and things of that ilk. And I think that's one of the things that we provide. And I think we as Catholic men have got to really work on driving out this notion of toxic masculinity and talk about what it does mean to be a true man. It means about teaching your children right and wrong and providing that example to provide for your family. And also, though we try to be the best we can for our wives, we know sometimes there's conflict, right? And having our children watch how we resolve conflict and compromise, it's just going to make them better people. So those are some of the things I would say we're hoping to be a beacon and an example and really drive those things forward.
Yeah, Tony, the stuff you're talking about, in terms of opposing toxic masculinity and reinforcing the traditional principles of manhood and fatherhood, you don't hear about that anywhere else in the culture. I mean, nobody talks about that, and frankly, the most aggressive voices speak against it. So,
Yeah.
what's it like? I guess advocating for these, countercultural and heterodox views all the time.
Yeah. Who knew that we were going to become countercultural, right?
Yes.
But unfortunately, here we are.
Mm,
So what we're trying to tell men is that don't go it alone.
mm,
And one of the greatest examples, and you hear about men that retire and they were so focused in their careers, and then it's sort of they retire and they lose identity.
mm.
In my council at my parish, we have a group, probably like 15 men, all in their retired, all in their mid to late 60s and all the way up into their 80s. They have found each other. So they and their families socialize, travel together. They're able to do the projects during the week when the other guys that are working. And we're trying to reinforce that these are benefits that you can take with you for your entire life. And we actually have a few guys that have banded together. They're doing a free tutoring program for kids in our Catholic school, and now have expanded it to the town to say, hey, these members of the Knights of Columbus are here to help. So what finer example too for young people, both boys and girls, to see these men providing, free tutoring services, for example, to help these kids, bettering in their education. John, I think we can't give up that fight. I mean, if we give up the ability to drive forth what it truly means to be a man for Christ and a man for your family, at a certain point, what else are you fighting for, kind of thing? And I think our bringing the faith piece, the core piece into what the Knights are doing and trying to draw more men in. And think about some of the other things around, right? Exodus 90 and all these other, faith formation groups. We're also becoming more integrated. I'm a member of Legatus and attend Legatus events. Tim Bush has had me to speak at a variety of Napa Institute events. And I think all of these institutions are realizing we've got to come at it together to really affect change. And I don't know. I think the pendulum, maybe I'm naively optimistic, or maybe I'm just crazy, but I do feel a little bit like the pendulum is starting to come back. And just look at some of the things that are coming to the fore in this election, what really matters for people. So I don't know. I'm hoping that we provide a better world for your children as they grow, for, hopefully for my grandchildren as they come, that we leave the place better than we found it.
No, agreed. The future looks bright, and it's organizations like the Knights of Columbus that are spreading that light. So, Tony, part of being a man and a father and somebody who protects is taking care of the needs of his family if something happens, right? And that's part of what the Knights of Columbus are all about. Talk to us about insurance and
Yeah.
why that's so core to the Knights, history, traditions, and offerings today.
Yeah. So Father McGivney, really that notion of coming together and providing for widows and orphans, because he was dealing with them in the parish at St. Mary's. And what we try to focus men on is the fact that we have financial services. So we offer our membership. You have to be a knight because of the way the tax code is written. We're tax exempt, but essentially we give away more money, John, in donations than we would actually pay in taxes. And that's why Congress has allowed this tax exemption for fraternal benefit societies to exist. So we offer life insurance, long-term care, disability, and annuity programs for our members and their families. The mutual funds can be purchased by anyone because that's just the nature of that business. And what we're trying to promulgate now for people is to understand that if the breadwinner goes down, and so many families are dual income families, if they lose one of those incomes, it could be catastrophic. So we try to approach it is really careful and thoughtful financial modeling and planning. And an interesting phenomenon, which fits into the finance part of your Faith and Finance Forum, is that last year, whether it's regular corporate employees, unions, diocesan, any employees. Last year, we crossed the line where less than 50% of the population in the United States is covered by a traditional defined benefit pension plan. And for those that may not know the vernacular, defined benefit is when you go in and put X number of years in a company and they send you that monthly check. So we've really been trying to educate our membership on the value of annuities for providing guaranteed income for life. So they've accumulated all this money in a 401k, now what? And to be able to use some in funds and some in annuities, I refer to the annuity like pensions and Social Security, right? The magic mailbox, right? That money just shows up month in and month out, and really trying to help people do that. So we view, and I say to our agents when I talk to them, as hokey as it sounds, yes, financial services is the engine that drives the nights and allows us to grow membership and grow charity. But the benefit to the members is that we're really trying to approach them and say, hey, I want to help you understand what does it cost, what does it cost Karen and Tony to be Karen and Tony in retirement? And how are you going to make that happen? And to have those honest conversations to tell members, hey, you're in great shape. Those are the best ones to have. Hey, you're a little close. We may have to talk about working a little longer, cutting some expenses, saving a little more, or your goals for your retirement don't match with the resources. You're young enough now. Let's talk about how we can get there. And I think these are important conversations that we can have, and doing it in a fraternal way where our members know it's not just a guy trying to sell product. It's a guy really there saying, hey, I care about you and your family. How do I help you get to where you need to go?
Wow, fascinating. So, Tony, why was it so important 10 years ago to start the Knights of Columbus Asset Advisors? Tell us a little bit about that, the early days of that. Yeah.
Yeah, it actually rewinds a little before then.
Okay.
In 2011, Carl Anderson came back from Davos, and I always joked with him. My worst day was his first. He went to the Economic Forum a few times, and I always joked my worst day was the day he came back because he was brimming with all sorts of ideas. But we decided we weren't managing money for anyone yet, and we decided to have an investment conference, and we held it in Chicago, figuring sort of centrally located. And God rest his soul, but his Eminence Cardinal George was there, and he was our opening speaker. And I believe you knew Cardinal George.
Yes.
What an extraordinary man and what an extraordinary mind. But in any event, the hardest thing and the most sort of gut wrenching thing when you're having a party or throwing a conference is, will anybody show up? So we sent out all sorts of invitations, and 85 institutions came to Chicago.
Wow.
And we put on a forum. And again, we weren't selling product, John. We were just talking about, hey, this is what we do for the Knights of Columbus. And this is what it means to manage a USCCB compliant portfolio. This is how we do it. And coming out of that, and then also we've been providing mortgage financing since 1896 to Catholic institutions, dioceses, parishes, Catholic schools, hospitals. And so we understand that when Cardinal, Archbishop, Bishop, Father stands and says, hey, I need you to donate to this, what those Catholic donations look like. So between others coming and saying, hey, you were really a great lender, could you possibly manage our money? And the answer was always no, we're not registered to do that. Then we had this conference in 2011, and that was the light bulb moment. There's something here. But as the church worked slowly, it took us from 2011 to 2014 to come around how to do it. And that was really the nascent beginning. So we had to anchor to something, John. And I know people have different arguments. Is the USCCB the right answer? But I always recall an old pastor at my parish explaining to me that it's a large Catholic church with many Catholics in it. So I had to anchor to something for the mutual funds. And we decided the USCCB because I could look people in the eye and say, who am I to argue with the collective wisdom of all the brother bishops.
Right. Yes.
Now, we have the ability, and we do manage separate portfolios at a certain level. Investors don't just have to select a mutual fund. We can manage a standalone portfolio for them. So if someone wants to be more restrictive, we certainly can do that. And I think we're on to the next phase now. This won't be a sale product, but we're working, Andrew Abela and I are working together to create a framework for proxy voting and for engagement. And both the USCCB and their 2021 document and the Mensorum Bonum document that came out of the Dicastery of Science out of the Vatican are both saying the same thing. Catholic investors need to invest in a way that's congruent with Catholic social teaching. And secondly, Catholic investors are called to engage with the companies where they own stock. And if those companies are doing things that are antithetical to the faith, we're being called to engage. Well, engagement means so many things, John. Is it a letter writing campaign, where you just carpet bomb all these companies? The Knights of Columbus, we're choosing targeted engagement where we can have meaningful dialogue with management. But for smaller diocesan Catholic institutions and even Catholic individuals, how do I vote my proxies? How do I know what's in or out of bounds with Catholic teaching? So we're looking to develop a framework where people will be able to tap into this resource. So I really see Father McGivney passing the hat to realizing that traditional insurance needed to be created. Insurance gave way to annuities and disability and long-term care. That investment conference in 2011 gave us the thought we should bring this investment engine to others. And we launched it in 14. And now, 10 years later in 2024, now we're focusing on how do we engage Catholics in a way that is compliant with our Catholic teaching and doing things in engagement that hopefully, John, I'm not so naive as to think we're suddenly going to get companies to swing over and espouse our Catholic values. But how about neutrality? How about they
Yes.
sell sneakers or soda or whatever their business is, and just do that and not do things or not engage in things that are antithetical to the things that you and I hold so close to our hearts. So that's kind of our history and what we're aiming for. And I still consider that the very best is yet to come.
Yeah, so in the Faith and Finance Forum, we're very concerned with the politicization and just the distraction of modern corporations. I don't get it, Tony. I don't understand why you can't just sell sneakers or sell aircraft or cars or light beer or whatever you're doing. I don't understand why you have to get into every political sensation that comes along. What's the way to correct or reverse that, Tony, and get these companies focused on what matters?
Well, it's interesting. If you think about us as Catholics, and let's call it as it is, John, our Protestant and Episcopalian and other Christian denominations, there's not a whole lot of daylight in many of the things that are important to us. And I think if we could just get them, if we voted as a block, if we voted proxies saying, look, this is what the right way is, and people engage with companies, when companies begin to understand that we as Christians, this country was founded on Judeo-Christian ideals, no matter how much people want to push them from the public square. And it frankly started when Kennedy was president back in 1960. We've been getting nudged systematically and continuously nudged from the public square. But as we know, in a capitalist economy, that dollars matter. And if we begin voting and behaving in a way of saying, hey, sell your light beer, sell your sneakers, your tires, your cars, or your tax services, and do that down the middle of the fairway and stop espousing things that are against so many of us that believe in Jesus and believe in God and the Judeo-Christian ideals of this country, that's when you're going to move them. And a certain beer company that'll remain nameless, when the backlash came, right? Because people said, hey, wait a minute, I don't necessarily buy everything that you're saying. Just sell me beer. All of a sudden you saw a change because why? Case volume went down exponentially. And other companies had their aha moments, retailers and some others. And I think the more hey, John, it's not about browbeating them. It's just about saying, hey, don't underscore what I believe, but could you stop kicking sand in our face and telling us that not only don't we believe that, we're going to espouse things that are against, traditional Christian values. I think it's having, you're seeing an effect, and I think you'll continue to see it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there is a rebalancing or recollaboration happening. And that's not with a ton of effort, frankly, from our side, if you will. I think basic inertia is helping a lot with that. Very interesting. Keep us posted on that proxy conversation. That's
Certainly
very
will.
interesting. How do the Knights of Columbus asset advisors make sure that your investments are aligned with the teachings of the Catholic faith, the laws of the Catholic faith, just
Yeah,
generally moral investing? What frameworks, what safeguards do you have in place to
sure.
assure that, Tony?
So, as you would imagine, the guys that are sitting, the men and women, guys generically, the men and women that sit on our trading desk, our bond desk is here in New Haven, and our equity desk is in Boston. They're MBA chartered financial analyst types. They're not moral theologians. So we employ an outside screening service to work with us basically, and we've divined down the teachings of the USCCB to investment rules, and they actually help us screen lists of companies so that we have the ones that are screened out. We also employ a moral theologian.
Hmm.
So we have a professor on bioethics who is on exclusive retainer to Knights of Columbus Asset Advisors to help call balls and strikes, because sometimes you need to dig a little bit deeper. So we have the combination of our knowledge with our third party screening service and with our moral theologian, all working from the basis of the USCCB. And it's a method that is robust. We perform the screening process every 90 days. So you're never more than 90 days away from a good scrub. But clearly, if a company made an announcement that they're pioneering a new embryonic stem cell analysis or therapy that brought them out of line, we would remove a company like that immediately. So it's a pretty robust and rigorous process that we employ, and again we do this at least 4 times a year.
And Tony, there's still, I don't know how this is true, but there's still this misconception that to have a morally aligned, congruent portfolio, you're going to suffer in terms of returns. That falsehood is
Yeah.
still out there somehow. Help us dispel that, Tony. It's not true, right?
Yeah, we and others are frankly not seeing it, John, and we see certain strategies where our performance is done well. Last year, I will tell you, for those that follow a growth strategy, um, it was hard because the companies, some of the healthcare companies that excelled in a particular extremely large online retailer who's out of bounds for Catholic investors, that stock was up, very high, north of 75% last year, made it difficult. That was 1 year. But I would tell you, over longer periods of time, we haven't found much of a problem. And I see, for me, this is sort of like every day, right? I've been running this portfolio. It's hard to believe, but since 2005, and it's what we do. So you don't whine about it. You put on your big boy pants, and you find things that you can buy, and we have found that over longer periods of time, the Catholic guidelines have not hurt us. And to know that we're trying to do good while we're doing well, and doing well for our investors and for the money that underlies our insurance and annuity products, it means everything in the world.
And what's your general stock market outlook for 2024, Tony? How do you think things are going? How do you think we're going to finish in the remaining quarters of 2024?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because, as you know, we had I write a blog post, and I wrote one this morning talking about sort of the weekend, and you think about, so Iran retaliates against Israel, that should be driving, but it feels like the Iranians are saying, hey, we did what we needed to do. Now sort of all eyes on Israel to see what's next. But we have inflation, John, and I think the biggest challenge is that the Fed drove inflation. We were at north of 9% in June of 2022, steadily drove it down by, you pick your measure, but it's still roughly north of 3%. That last mile, if you will, to get down to 2 is going to be a big battle. Retail sales came out today, gangbusters. So the Fed wants lower inflation. What I learned when I was in business school was that full employment in the U.S. is when you're 96%. Well, we're through that. Unemployment's 3.7%. So you've got a strong labor market. Wages are growing faster than inflation, and you also have very strong retail sales. We've got some geopolitical bumps. The stock market's up, quite a bit this year. I'm just pulling up a number. We had a kind of a weakish Friday, but the reality of it is that I just want to pull up this number, John. So I'm quoting exact. As we sit here at 11:40 a.m. on April 15th, the S&P is up 7.7% this year. It's a pretty big move for the first, quarter and 2 weeks. So we're basically telling clients this. We think this year is sort of a single-ish digit, maybe double-ish digit type of year, low double digit, but to rebalance, take those gains, rebalance to your target asset allocation. Trees don't grow to the sky. This last little bit of Fed inflation is going to be the last mile's the toughest mile to fight. We're back over 4.6% on the 10-year. The 2-year treasury is flirting with 5%. It's currently, 4.95%. So there's some headwinds out there, but we're continuing to grow. So I think it's sort of, does inflation win? Does that cause, the Fed to maybe not cut rates, but have to increase rates to fight inflation? And if that happens, that's tough for the capital markets. Or do we muddle along? And the question is, what do we have? You still have the problems of, is China going to cross the Strait of Taiwan and attack Taiwan? Ukraine and Russia continues to grind on. Israel certainly protecting themselves from the absolute travesty that came out of the Gaza, and now with direct eyeball to eyeball with Iran. So the old saw, as you know, John, is the markets climb a wall of worry, plenty to worry about. So we think the markets are, it's pretty fully priced right now. And I think my greatest advice, I tell my clients all the time, this is a year to make sure you're thinking about your long-term needs, you're rebalancing back to your target levels, and you take that old adage of trees don't grow to the sky. So those are the things that are informing me right now as we manage both the insurance company assets as well as the mutual funds for our outside clients.
Great insights this morning from Tony Minopoli, Knights of Columbus Asset Advisors. Hey, Tony, comment a little bit more about the impact of inflation, because I mean, I know with the Knights of Columbus being so rooted in the immigrant story of the United States and the working class and the middle class and the aspirational dream of our country, inflation hits that group harder than anyone, right? When you're paying for gas, paying for groceries, paying for housing. I mean, how much concern does that give you? Because I mean, you're right. I mean, I guess the year over year, month over month rates might be stabilizing, but inflation compounds. I mean, the baseline numbers are all higher than they were a few years ago. I mean, it's not really pure relief in the true sense. What's your thought on inflation generally?
Yeah, well, you hit it right on the head. I quipped recently that whether you're putting 20 gallons in your Bentley or your Buick, right, you're still buying 20 gallons of fuel. And let's talk about when you begin going down the socioeconomic ladder, the impact of higher gasoline, higher fuel oil, higher food, right? That's a tax on the lowest the lowest levels of rungs on that economic ladder. Because while at higher levels you might consume different food, there's only so much food that a human demands. But our fuel consumption, our need for gasoline to get to work, or heating oil or natural gas or propane to heat our homes, just because you're wealthier, you're not going to turn the thermostat to 90, right? I mean, that doesn't happen. So the thing to keep in mind is that 70% of our economy is consumer driven. And one of the things that we look at, John, is that we look at Citicorp and Bank of America. We look at their credit card data every month because, as you know, they're giant banks here in the U.S., big issuers of credit cards. And one of the things that we see is that non-discretionary spending, food, drugs, basic apparel, that spending is going up. And what's even more complicating the issue is that it's going up and people are credit card spending. Well, when you have to start charging your food, man, that could put your personal financial position in a downward spiral. The other thing is housing. Housing costs are are just insane. And we stopped building during the great financial crisis. It's been estimated that we did not build something like 4 million housing units. And we had the baby boom, and then I'm a Gen X guy born in 1968. That's a smaller cohort, but this cohort coming up now, Gen Z and the millennials, they are much, much bigger than the baby boomer cohort. They need to form families. They need to move out of their mom's basement. They need to consume. And man, they're finding that a massive amount of their income is being eaten up by basics like food and shelter and fuel. So if you start thinking, as you pointed out, John, even if you're compounding at 3.5% at the baseline, 3 or 4 years out, that begins to consume an even greater proportion of what would otherwise be discretionary income. And that's what could portend poorly for economic performance as you look forward. The final thing, if I can add, is debt and deficit. The Biden administration put forth a budget that has a $2 trillion structural shortfall. Tax receipts at the US Treasury will fall $2 trillion below what we're spending in this budget. And that's just not sustainable. And when you think about the 10-year at 464, well, what if it's 564 or 664? And we're having to finance that debt. I read an article many years ago that said if the US didn't get control of debt and deficit, that in the out years, looking out 20 years from now, we'll basically be an insurance company with an army, right? Paying social safety net and defense. That is not a great situation for the US. Is it too late? No. And I'm an eternal optimist. And even as a bond guy, I'm an eternal optimist and I love this country and we can get it right. But our elected officials have got to get focused. And it happened in the UK. And they had to start turning their spending around. And I think the day of reckoning is going to come to the hallowed halls of Congress and the Senate, where voters are also going to say, we just can't do this. We simply can't do it.
Yeah, I read last week that $1 trillion is added to the national debt every 90 days now. It's
Yeah.
it's absolutely
Yeah.
crazy. In terms of fixing it, and you and I are both optimists, Tony. I think we can turn around too. But you got to look at one of these big buckets, right? It's either national security spending or entitlement spending. What would be your strategy? I guess you don't have to get into the details, but generally
Yeah.
speaking, philosophically, how would you correct the ship?
Well, I think it's got to be the best deals are the ones that often stink a little bit for everyone, right? So I think there's some pieces on tax, there's some pieces on spending, but the world cannot afford a weakened United States.
Mm.
I mean, we just can't. We need to be there. John, if we weren't patrolling the Strait of Hormuz,
Mm.
gasoline wouldn't be 3 something a gallon. It'd be 5 something a gallon, 6
Mm.
something a gallon, right? Because of uncertainty. But we're going to have to figure, and also it's, if you backed out the COVID spending, and if you took COVID spending out of the current budget, it's not balanced, but it's a heck of a lot closer. So we have to have the courage to stop wasteful spending, allowing illegal immigration to occur and then saying that we're going to support it. That's not sustainable. Saying that you're going to slash student debt and just say we're going to forgive debt, that's not sustainable. So we're going to have to do it incrementally. And it can't just be student body left or student body right, because that's just not a good solution. And I think part of what we have now is that the extreme sides of both parties, one wants to, cut taxes, cut spending, and everyone fend for themselves. The other side wants to give every last piece of candy to anyone they can. As you know, life is more nuanced than that, and it's going to have to be something more in the middle. But I don't think it can be done strictly at the altar of national defense, because I think we do that at our own peril.
Yeah, indeed. Tony, switching gears a little bit here, one of the things that fascinates me about the Knights of Columbus is that it can be described in so many different ways. It's a big financial operation, insurance operation. It's a Catholic ministry. It's a national treasure and institution that's so deeply intertwined in the history of our country over the past 150 years. I'm curious, as a people intensive company, a lot of staff, a lot of human resources. How do you put how do you keep the mission at the center of everything you do? Like how
Yeah.
do you avoid getting distracted by kind of the, the issue of the day, or, whether or not
Uh,
you're making enough money that year or whatever. I mean,
yeah.
how do you keep your team focused
Yeah.
on what matters, the mission, the purpose, the dream of the Knights of Columbus?
It's a fabulous question. First thing I would tell you is this: the leadership of the Knights of Columbus, the supreme officers, these are all men they're Catholic men, they're Knights of Columbus. When you look at our other leadership positions, whether men or women, they're all people that are truly in line with the mission of the order. And I think it cascades from there. So everyone that works for the Knights is not Catholic. Everyone that works for the Knights is not a member. But I would say virtually all of us are focused on the mission. I joined the Knights in 1994. I started advising the Knights outside in '02 and became an employee in '05. And I think many people that are drawn here, John Morello, who's our general counsel. John had a very, very senior job in the Department of Justice, hugely well educated, amazingly accomplished attorney. But when John met Carl Anderson and we were looking for a new general counsel, I mean, John came here. So I think it's the fact that leadership believes so fervently in Catholic ideals and in the Knights of Columbus. It's what really helps preserve the culture. We've seen some other fraternals, John, where they wanted to become more financial service providers and they let the mission go away. And I would say every Supreme Knight that has occupied that office, and is absolutely true of Patrick Kelly, not going to let that happen. So I think that, if anything, is the secret sauce. It's making sure that people are fully aligned and recognize mission critical, that what we do fraternally is so vitally important to our identity that we can't let it fritter away, or what has made us special for 140 years. You can lose that very, very quickly.
Yes, indeed. Well said. Tony, sticking on this topic of leadership real quick, one of the blessings you've been given in your life is to work closely with Carl Anderson and now Patrick Kelly. I wonder, for the sake of our listening and viewing audience, would you just share maybe an anecdote from each of them? Just maybe a story or a leadership principle that they left
Yeah.
you with, that
Yeah.
because you've had this privilege of being close to them, which so few
Uh,
of us have.
so my favorite Carl story is during the financial crisis, and it's '08. Stuff is hitting the fan from every direction, and he calls me and he said, "How's it going?" And he was in the Vatican at the time. He was having his an annual meeting he has with the Holy Father. So I go in, as you would imagine, John. I start rattling off, stocks are here, bonds are here, gold, oil. And he said, Tony, how are you doing?
Yes.
I said, Carl, I'm stressed. I'm stressed, but I'm trying to do the best I can. He said, do me a favor. He said, I got to jump, but can you have your entire department in your office tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock? I'm going to call in. Carl calls in at 11 and he tells my team, I need you to know that you enjoy my absolute faith and confidence, and nobody is losing their job. But I need you to use all of your skill and ability to protect the order at this most critical time. And it was like somebody flipped a switch, and it changed it. And I would have always gone through a wall for him. And after that moment, a thicker wall. And that was a moment in leadership, John, where you have to put your cloak of leadership around people. And it just really changed the notion. And that to me encompassed, who Carl was. And he really believed in driving the order. Patrick, very similar shared ideals, but a different guy. Patrick was a captain in the U.S. Navy for 24 years. While he's a super friendly guy, right? Midwestern bearing, Marquette undergrad, Marquette Law School. I always say, do not mistake the steel in the spine, right? He is
Mm.
an amazingly strong leader. And he's talked about, getting the Catholic men right. And he's walked that walk. And I think the most, when the day after the Russians invaded Ukraine, he had our executive committee from the board, of which I'm privileged to serve on. He had a quick call with us. He said, all right, we have to do something. And on that call was the Ukraine Solidarity Fund. And Patrick visited Poland, where we were building our staging for supporting the Ukrainians. And then actually, after dark, actually went into Ukraine to visit our members. And again, recognizing that while the Knights have been men of charity, he led us in the creation of our first ever fully written and published strategic plan. And one of the 6 tenets of that plan is to be first in faith as in charity. And that was the driving force for developing this core program and saying, we've got to get the men right. We've got to get toxic masculinity out of the vernacular and really help men be better. So those are 2 things I would tell you anecdotally that speak to their solidarity with their Catholic faith, but recognizing the unique moments that they were in and the things that they needed to do to drive the Knights forward. And I will tell you, we just had our board meeting, and Karen and I got to have dinner with Carl and Dorian post the board meeting. He was my boss. He's the guy that hired me. He was a mentor, but he still is a member of our board, a friend, and I've been blessed to know him. And as I mentioned earlier, I've known Patrick since he joined, and to know these men so deeply and know the fine examples they are. It's why I think the Knights are, why we've been great, and why I think we'll continue to be just a great world-class leading organization.
Gosh, thanks so much for that, Tony. As we approach the end of our time together, and any parting thoughts, anything you wanted to share with our audience, perhaps we didn't cover regarding the Knights, the asset advisors, or anything else that's on your mind today?
I would say we're excited about the things that we're doing. You're going to see more things from Knights of Columbus Asset Advisors as we reach beyond our membership. Reaching out and appealing to other Catholic investors, letting them know that these products are here. But I think we want to make sure that we're always delivering that message within that context, within that framework, that investing with us actually allows you to support charity. And I'm not the marketing guy, but I said to our head of marketing for the whole organization, if it were up to me and me alone, the thing that I want to drive through people is that every time you interact with the Knights of Columbus, charity is enhanced. If you're a member working in charity, you're helping charity. If you and your wife and your kids attend a Knights of Columbus pancake breakfast, that $7 that you pay on the way in, John, helps charity. If you buy an insurance product or an annuity, long-term care disability, or a mutual fund, the profitability supports of what we do with the Knights. And we're looking at other financial services for both members and non-members alike, because again, the more interactions that we create, the more charity that we can drive. And the final thing I'll say, which is kind of cool, our newest project, and I know you've been to St. Peter's many times, we're restoring the baldacchino, the covering that is over the main altar. And it's a pretty cool project. And we have other projects. We restored the Jubilee doors many years ago. The Christ, the crucifix, when you come in on the right side and you pass the Pietà, there's a large wooden cross that we restored a few years ago. So I'm always proud when I go there, because I look at these little things that I know the Knights have done. So I think when we can pull, and I think it very much keeps with your program, John, when we can pull faith and finance together, even within our forum, we think we make the world a little bit better, and we make the world a little bit better place that we leave it than we found it. So
Yeah, no
that's our story,
question.
my friend.
If I could add just one more to your list, my favorite church in America is the National Basilica in Washington, D.C. And of course, one of its most prominent features is the Knights of Columbus Tower, which is so beautiful and so proud, right at the front in the entrance there. Well, Tony, we're at our end of our time, unfortunately, my friend. Every time we're together, I feel like we could go on and on. But you mentioned that you have a blog and perhaps a communication you put out. How can
Yeah.
our listeners access that and hear more of your ideas?
So one way to do it is you can connect with me on LinkedIn, and then you can go that way. Or if you just Google Knights of Columbus Asset Advisors, there's a little section called CIO Corner, and that's a little blog post. I publish probably several times a week, and it's really just quick hitters of, hey, this is what's going on in the economy, this is what you think, and I sprinkle in a little bit of personal financial advice in there as well. Hopefully the advice is free. Hopefully it's priceless. So we'll see how it goes. John, so good to be with you, buddy.
God bless you, my friend. Thank you, everyone, for being on this episode of the Faith and Finance Forum. We've been on with Tony Minopoli from the Knights of Columbus Asset Advisors. Thank you to our sponsor, Aquinas Wealth Advisors. See you in the next program, everyone. God bless.